Hi, Donna! Picara!
Hi, welcome to Travel Angel. I'm Donna Lynn, and today we're taking you to the Holy Land. We're going to visit Banias, the lost city of Pan in Israel, near the borders of Lebanon and Syria. We're going to trace the steps of Jesus, the prophets, and the patriarchs of the Abrahamic faiths. My guest today is Dr. John Wilson from Pepperdine University, Professor of Religion. Thank you so much for being here.
Good to be here.
So, you went to Banias, the lost city of Pan, and you're a field archaeologist. You've written several books, including this one here.
Right, that's right. Yes, Caesarea Philippi and Banias are the same place, so people get confused. Caesarea Philippi is the ancient name because it's named after Caesar, so Caesarea. It was named after Caesar by one of the sons of Herod the Great, famous Herod, who, you know, the story about the babies in Bethlehem. People always know that story at Christmas time. And he had a son named Philip, and Philip built the city, so he named it Caesarea, and then he named it after himself, so it's Caesarea Philippi. But the Israelis today call it Banias, and the Arabs call it Banias. And that's because it has buried in it the name Pan. Over there in the Middle East, P becomes B a lot of times. So Panias becomes Banias. And that's the place. And it was named after Pan because there's a big cave there. And ancient people believed that the god Pan lived in the cave. So it was Banias. You know the god Pan, while I'm talking about this, the god Pan is the little guy with the goat feet and the horns. And he was the god of the forests. And he would startle people when they were out in the forest. So we have the word panic, which is when you get scared and you have no good reason. So ancient people said that was because Pan had jumped out from behind a bush or whatever. So anyway, the cave of Pan was there, so they called it Banias. And Philip built a city, so they called the city Caesarea Philippi.
Now, there's a beautiful waterfall there.
Right. It's one of the most beautiful places in Israel. A lot of people think of the Middle East as being sand dunes and desert, but actually up in the northern part of Israel and in southern Lebanon, it's very green. There are mountains up there. There are beautiful mountain streams. You would think you were in Colorado. And right close to Banias is a beautiful waterfall. And in fact, this cave I was talking about, the cave of Pan, the water just flows right out of the bottom of the cave, and it becomes the Jordan River. That's the famous Jordan River. Its source is really there at Banias. So when we used to go dig, and people would say, well, how is it living out in the desert? And it doesn't really get hot. And I really didn't want to tell them that we were actually, it was more like having a vacation in Colorado than going out in the desert, because it's wonderful green, trees everywhere, lots of animals. And the whole area has been made by the Israelis into a national park. And there are deer and gazelles and also wild boar and beautiful birds and so on up there. And it was a wonderful place to build a city. So ancient people had a way of finding the prettiest place to build their cities.
And the water flows maybe towards the Hula Valley?
It goes down into the Hula Valley, where it became a swamp. And for centuries it was a swamp. Again, the Israelis have drained the swamp, and they plant cotton and various other kinds of crops down there. During the days when the Arabs were in control of the area, they would grow sugar cane, or anyway, they would grow things that they could make sugar out of. And it's always been a very fertile area. It's very different from the picture that people often get of the Middle East. The water's cold, it's beautiful. There were water buffalo in the Hula Valley. big black water buffalo, and a lot of creatures that you think of as sort of being swamp creatures. Now, of course, there's not a swamp anymore because it's been drained out, but the water still flows through.
Now, what prompted you to go to Banias?
Well, the most archaeological digs start either because somebody has something they want to try to prove, or we want to find out something about an ancient site. But a lot of archaeology now is done, it's called salvage archaeology, and that's where the government wants to build a road or somebody wants to build a hotel, and they want to be sure that they don't destroy some valuable archaeological evidence. So they will call together a team and do the archaeology first. What happened at Banias was, as I say, it was a national park. They needed more parking for tourists to come, so they wanted to extend the size of the parking lot. So the government said, well, you can only do that when we check and be sure that there's nothing under there, that you might destroy. Well, the moment they started checking, they found that not only could they not extend the parking lot because there were so many archaeological remains there, but we actually took their parking lot away from them because the whole parking lot had wonderful ruins from Roman times and later times just buried under it. And so once we started digging, started finding all of these things, the government decided then, well, these are going to be so spectacular that tourists will want to come and see them. So it's okay, we lost our parking lot, but we gained some wonderful things for tourists to see.
Wow, now how long did you spend there?
We worked there about 10 years or so. You don't dig year-round. Most of these large archaeological digs are only done for a few weeks, and normally in the summer. And then the experts take the things that have been found and try to, work with them in laboratories and try to figure out the age of things and the use of things, the artifacts that you find. So you can find enough in 6 weeks that it'll take the experts the rest of the year to really, work on that, measure everything, photograph it, and so on. And unfortunately, we had to stop because the political situation up on the border, goes sometimes good and sometimes not so good. And it got to the point where we used students, university students from a lot of different universities, go over in the summer to the Middle East to dig. And we were a little concerned about having students that close to the border. So we had to stop right in the middle of some wonderful finds. We'll leave them for the next generation. They can go back and find the things we didn't get to look for.
When was this and what did you find? You have some things you can show us.
Yes, well, we worked primarily in the 90s. It was, as I say, it was over a period of several years. And some of the things that you tend to find, one thing in particular that we probably want to look at is a little lamp. People had to have light, they had no electricity, they had candles, but really these little lamps, little clay lamps, are very common to find in archaeological digs because almost every room in a house had one, or sometimes several. And when people would go out at night, they would carry these little lamps. And the little lamp is full of olive oil. And you put a little wick in, there's a hole in it, and you put the little piece of cotton or something in there. Let the olive oil soak in it, and then you light it. And it'll burn, for several hours before it burns up. And these were made by the thousands, and because they weren't thought of as being very valuable, when one broke, they just throw it out in the trash. And, archaeologists, what we deal with is trash, basically. We find the things that people broke and threw away. Only once in a while you find something that is intact. But that's very, very unusual. Most pottery and lamps and so on have been crushed.
Well, these are perfect and they look in pristine condition, and
Yeah.
I was actually expecting you to bring like little fragments like the size of fingernails that you sifted through, so these are fabulous.
Yeah, well, there are a few things that are small. Mostly the smaller things survive intact, but larger things almost never do. There are these wonderful experts connected with all archaeological digs who know how to take all these pieces And like a jigsaw puzzle, they know how to put them back together. And it's wonderful to see. You'll find a pot that's in 100 pieces. And they take them into the laboratory and they just begin to work. And if you can find a little bit of the base or a little bit of the rim, that gives you a start. And then literally, like you would do a jigsaw puzzle, you begin to put the pieces back together. And sometimes we find that all the pieces are still there. Usually not. But occasionally you do. So a lot of things you see in museums that look like they're intact are really glued back together by experts. But once in a while you do find something that has not even doesn't even have a crack in it.
Now, what would regular people, what would we do there if we went to Banias besides just it being beautiful?
Well, the Park Service has built hiking trails, and people like to go along the river and see the falls and go back into the cave. And then, of course, the most spectacular find at Banias was the palace. You see, I mentioned this was built by Herod Philip, who was a king over a little territory, a little monarchy up in the north in Galilee, or above Galilee. And then his descendants for almost 100 years had their capital in Banias. So we actually found the royal palace.
Is this Nimrod's?
No, well, Nimrod, there's a little stream called Nimrod's Stream, because up on a hill up above Banias, there's a Crusader period castle. And the local people there, the sort of tribesmen who lived there, called it Nimrod's Palace. So they've given the stream that name. It really didn't have anything to do with the Nimrod who's mentioned in the Bible. But this palace dates from the Roman times, and it was apparently the palace. It was probably built by Herod Agrippa, who was a nephew or grandnephew of Herod Philip.
Was he the son, or no, he was a nephew? Sorry.
Yeah, it's a little complicated family. The Herods are very hard to figure out. For one thing, they married several times. They had children by several different women. There are lots of half-brothers and half-sisters and cousins and second cousins and all that kind of thing. But it was a town that was where there's this Herodian palace. And there are not many places that survive from ancient times where you can actually walk down the hall in a house, so to speak, that a biblical character lived in. But Herod Agrippa is mentioned in the New Testament. There's a story about the Apostle Paul when he's been made a prisoner in the other Caesarea. This is Caesarea Philippi. There's another Caesarea called Caesarea Maritima. And he's in prison there, and he's brought for a hearing before Herod Agrippa. Oh, this Herod Agrippa is the one whose palace we found.
Wow.
So that's kind of nice. That seldom happens that you have somebody mentioned in the Bible that you actually can find their house, so to speak. So, but that's the most spectacular find there. And there are, a lot of it is still there. It was all, we found only the first floor, which was now all underground, but at the time it was above ground. And while we're on the topic, the discovery was a wonderful thing, because there were some young men from Greece who had volunteered to help. And they're digging. And then we had come to the last day of the dig. On the last day of the dig, you sweep, you clean up and sweep. Well, these young men were very macho, and they couldn't believe someone was going to ask them to take a broom and sweep. So when we turned our eyes away from them, they got out their picks and shovels and started digging again. They weren't supposed to. They were supposed to be finished for the year. And one of them, suddenly the dirt began to fall in instead of out. And he looked down and he said to the others, "Somebody get a light. You're not going to believe this." And then he put his feet in and very foolishly jumped in, because it could have been 100 feet down. He didn't know. As it turned out, it was a long passageway.
Wow.
And no one had been in there since ancient times. And it was part of this palace. So that's the way we found it.